I managed to read 12 books in the month of May, and today I'm going to tell you guys about them. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Naya. If you're not, welcome back. Truly, the month of May was me and my Kindle against the world because 11 of the 12 books I read were either e-library books or electronic advanced reader copies. I'm gonna mix it up this time around. I feel like normally when I do these videos, I go in order of when I read them or when I finished them, but I'm gonna kind of do a little genre breakdown. So in the month of May, I read 3 books by Paisley Hope. I read Holding the Reins, Training the Heart, and Riding the High. I've now read 4 of the 5 of the books in this series of Paisley Hopes that are like cowboy romances. It is like the epitome of what you would expect when you think of like a really bingeable, fast-paced, spicy cowboy romance. Holding the Reins, I gave 3.75 stars. You follow Cece and Nash, and it's a brother's best friend type of cowboy romance. I gave it 3.75 stars because it didn't wow me in any particular way. I feel like there were a couple of portions where the story fell flat, and I'll be so honest, I don't remember much about the book. Not to say it was bad, it just wasn't necessarily memorable, but I do think having now read this much of the series, I can see her writing improving over time. Which now leads me to the second book in the series, Training the Heart. I gave 4 stars. Oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever read a contemporary romance book with a couple as freaked out as the couple in this book. In this book, you follow Wade and Ivy, and Wade is the brother of Cece, the girl in the first book. This is kind of a workplace romance, grumpy sunshine, cowboy romance. Something else I noticed in this book and in this series as a whole is there is a lot more emotional depth than I expected going into them, which of course is a very pleasant surprise. Now, like I said, the smut kept coming with this book. It felt like a lot to me, honestly, and I feel like I read a good amount of smutty books. And I'm not saying that the entire book was smut. They definitely had like the buildup of their relationship and of the tension before the tension broke. But once the smut started, it kept coming. Solid book overall, but minus points because in the beginning of the book, in the male main character's point of view, he kind of like overly sexualized and like lusted over the female main character a little too much in his internal dialogue that it kind of threw me off. But he did make up for it later on with how like emotionally attached and how like actually obsessed he was with her. And lastly, for my May Paisley Hope run, I read Riding the High, which I gave 4.5 stars. This was really good. I think this was my favorite in the series that I've read so far. In this book, you follow Cole and Ginger, and in like every interconnected series, you get hints about their relationship in the earlier books. But what I really liked about this book is it really shifted the perspective on Ginger and Cole's relationship. In the earlier books, you definitely get peeks into their interactions with each other, but they're always kind of giving each other crap, giving each other grief. It always seems like there's this really thick tension between them. And you find out very early on in their book that they actually have like a very deep emotional friendship that they have just kept very private from everyone else in their lives. And I think experiencing that friendship and hearing about the years of yearning between the two of them really made when they got together very impactful. I really like this, and I love a single dad trope. Still in the category of romance, I read Strange Familiars by Kesh Chow, which I gave 3 stars. This book had crumbles of things that I thought I would enjoy and things I did enjoy, but overall fell flat. In this book, you follow Gwendolyn and Harrison, who are both students at this magical veterinary academy. And the whole setup of the book is that Harrison and Gwendolyn are constantly fighting each other for like #1 spot in their university. Gwendolyn is the quiet, odd scholarship kid, and Harrison is this kind of nepo baby, very rich, very snobby boy. And something in their world regarding the magic system starts to go awry, so they have to put their differences aside to come together and kind of figure things out. Now, I have my iPad and my notes. Now, to start with the good, I think this book did so well in diversity and creating a very diverse cast of characters that just flowed very naturally with the story. Gwendolyn also had an incredible backstory, and I think as a character is the exact type of main character I like to root for, someone who is very scrappy, very like confident in herself, and certainly someone I want to root for in an academic novel setting. You go in with the premise of the book, and even in the first few chapters, with this like idea that, oh, these two have always butted heads. These two are always at each other's throats. They don't like each other. I don't know if I buy the romance. It felt so insta-love, insta-lust to me, and I just don't think enough was done in the way of these two characters getting to know each other and getting to understand each other that I can buy that they loved each other after the few weeks of time they spent together in this book. And personally, I think their class difference was brought up way too much and in a way that was just so like in your face. I will totally admit that it might just be me because I don't read a lot of fantasy, but the magic system did not make sense to me, and I never thought it was explained well enough or the world was built well enough that I was able to really understand what was going on. So when things went wrong, I still didn't understand what was happening. Like I said, might just be me. I didn't get it. The book did end on a cliffhanger, and honestly, I'm not sure if I am interested or convinced enough to keep going when the next book comes out. The next romance that I finished was Lost and Found by Tara DeWitt, which I gave 4.5 stars. This is the last book in the Spoons Oregon series by Tara, and I thought it was a very sweet way to end the series. In this book, you follow Bea and Silas, who have known each other their entire lives because they both grew up in the same small town, and Bea is reeling from the recent death of her lifetime best friend, and Silas is also dealing with this traumatic incident that happened to him on duty as a firefighter. Now, I will always appreciate a book that handles grief well, and I think this book really did. I think the approach that this book took to Bea's grief was really well done. It was complicated, it was messy, there was a lot of layers to it. The relationship itself between the two main characters was so well done, so well paced. It was pretty slow burn given the length of the book, and I think the tension between the two characters was built up very well. The only thing I wish we got a bit more of from this book is Silas's journey. So Silas is a burn victim from being on duty as a firefighter, and I think that happened in the second book of the series, so there is like a chunk of time between when that event happened and now in the events of this book. And you do get this mini side plot of Silas going to a burn victims like support group and a couple scenes with that support group, but I feel like it wasn't enough for my taste personally. I expected a little bit more from his journey. So that was my biggest con with this book. I think overall though, I really liked their romance. I love like a long time yearning friends to lovers situation, and this book executed it very well. I literally feel like that Phil Dunphy iPad meme. Okay, so next on my list, I'm lumping these next three books together as fiction. We have literary fiction, dystopian / speculative fiction. My only physical book of the month of May, Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, I gave this book 4.5 stars. In this book, you follow Lauren, who is a teenager in California in the 2020s, and in this version of the world, the United States has truly fallen into just very intense economic and environmental collapse. This book was published in the 1990s, so it was looking at the mid-2020s as this near future. This might be what happens if we really don't take our shit seriously. It is very daunting to read a dystopian novel set in kind of the time that you are currently living in, and seeing how there are things that kind of came true. Lauren suffers from a condition in this book called hyperempathy, where she is very susceptible to the emotional and physical pain of other people. So if she sees someone get punched in the face, she will feel that punch in the face. If she sees someone grieving a lost loved one, she will feel that same grief. And it's obviously a very difficult condition to have in this kind of era of societal collapse. And in this book, you follow her journey as she meets new people, fights to survive, and starts to kind of create this new religion or this new way of belief and thinking. Overall, I liked this book a lot. I think Octavia E. Butler writes in a way that is so captivating, and there is so much in this book that you could dissect and apply to our modern day. I read this for a book club at work, and I think reading this book with other people is the best way to go because there is so much to discuss. The only thing I did not love was the age gap between our main character and her eventual love interest. I do understand that in the context of this being like a version of the world in which society has kind of collapsed and you don't have a lot of options, you know, fine. But our main character is 18 at the time of her getting with her love interest, and it is brought up on multiple occasions that the love interest reminds her of her father and is the same age that her father would be, and that just... but I do highly recommend. Next in the category of fiction, we have Songs for Other People's Weddings by David Levithan, featuring songs by Jen Sleckman. I gave this book 2.75 stars, which was really disappointing because I came in really excited about the premise of the book, and also really excited because David Levithan wrote one of the young adult books that I think really formed me as a young reader. Sometime in either late elementary school or early middle school, I read Every Day by David Levithan, and to this day, in my mind, I hold it as one of my favorite books from that era of my life. So honestly, I picked up Songs for Other People's Weddings because David Levithan wrote it. In this book, you follow Jay, who is a wedding singer, and every chapter in this book is broken up into a different wedding that Jay is performing at. Jay's whole thing is that he likes to really get to know the couple and write them a custom song for their wedding, and that premise alone really sucked me in. Now, also part of this book is an overarching plot line of Jay's own personal romantic relationship with his partner. So in this book, you follow a large cast of characters and all of their individual love stories in each chapter, but you do have that overarching through line of Jay and his girlfriend. I hated both of them. I cared so little for both of our main characters. They both individually and together pissed me off so many times that I was not rooting for them, and honestly, I was dragging my feet through the last like 40% of this book. The romance just felt so flat. I think our main character was so whiny and also did not have a backbone at all in regards to our female main character. I think neither of them handled the situation of their relationship well, and it pissed me off, and I don't recommend this book. Sorry. I honestly think 2.75 is a little generous. I think it's because the other parts of the story, the other elements of the weddings, like, you know, saved it a little bit, but it honestly might be down to like a 2.5. Probably one of my favorite reads of the month was Burn Down Master's House by Clay Cane, which I gave 5 stars. This book was freaking phenomenal. I am still thinking about it and I am recommending it to everyone I'm speaking to. If you're watching this, please read this book. I would consider this a historical fiction, but there are elements of real history that Clay Cane weaved into this book. I highly recommend reading Clay's introduction / preface to this book. I highly recommend the intro to every book. I think you should always read the preface. But Clay Cane really made it a point that he wanted to write a different kind of slave story. He talked about how it's very common in American media for stories about slavery to be almost like trauma, you know, just really like emphasizing the tragedy and the trauma and not giving any sort of redemption or joy. And this book is kind of his way to remedy that. Now, I will say, this book does not shy away from the horrific nature of slavery and the tragedy of that history. But what Clay Cane does in this book is reclaims the often suppressed histories and stories of those who rebelled and fought back against their oppressors. There are 4 chapters in this book, and each chapter focuses on a different primary set of characters, but they are all interconnected. I really don't want to tell you more about this book. I want you to really experience it, but I will read you a portion of Clay Cane's intro to the book, which I think is very symbolic of kind of his whole intention with this novel. In the end, each of these historical fragments represents people whose stories have been partially buried by time and erasure. Historical fiction allows me to bond their lived experiences into a coherent story. I don't believe uprisings are isolated incidents. They are all connected via the souls who were long denied a free life. Oh my gosh, my iPad died. My notes are on my iPad. I'm gonna read on my phone. Sorry, guys. 1 second. This is embarrassing. Last in fiction I read Next Time Will Be Our Turn by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I gave this book 4.75 stars and I loved this. This book really surprised me in the best way possible. I didn't know what I was really expecting going into it and I came out obsessed. In this book, you follow Magnolia, who is basically retelling her life story to her granddaughter, Izzy. It's set up like a conversation over various nights in which it's primarily Magnolia retelling about her life with occasional little interludes from Izzy and conversations between the two. The whole timeline of the story that Magnolia is telling you in this book is her first moving to the United States from Indonesia at 16, and then her life through, I believe, around her early 30s or late 20s. In this book, you tackle so much. You tackle the complex relationships between sisters, misogyny and expectations in Asian cultures, and specifically in this book, Indo-Chinese culture, the struggles with queer love and identity, and really all of the bumps and learning curves that come with navigating growth throughout all of your seasons of life. It juggled joy, tragedy, and the struggles of growing up and coming into yourself in a very captivating way to read, but in a way that also felt very reflective of what could be someone's real life. If you go into this book expecting a sweeping romance and expecting romance to be the forefront of the book, I think you will be disappointed in that regard. There is romance, don't get me wrong, but truly at its core, this book is about Magnolia and her journey, and it is a beautiful one. I loved seeing so much how Magnolia's perspectives on herself and the world ebbed and flowed depending on where she was in her life, where she was living at the time. It was so well done. The ending wrecked me. I did cry. And this is a very personal bonus point to this book. I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and Magnolia goes to UC Berkeley for undergrad. And I've read books before where main characters go to UC Berkeley. It's, I feel like, a pretty common school to be written into novels. But I think in this book, more than in any other book that I've heard Cal be mentioned, it really impacted our main character's life. It impacted how she saw the world, it impacted how she moved in her adult life, and I really enjoyed that. And our last category is nonfiction. First, we have The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. This is as comprehensive a history of 100 years you can get in less than 350 pages. Broken up by major events into multiple periods of history, Khalidi takes us through 100 years of the Zionist project and colonial war in Palestine. If you are someone who wants to learn more about Palestine or someone who cares deeply about the Palestinian cause, I think this is required reading. It without a doubt deepened and broadened my knowledge on this region and the Palestinian cause. I gave that 5 stars. I don't remember if I said that. Next in nonfiction, we have Chain of Ideas, The Origins of Our Authoritarian Age by Ibram X. Kendi, which I gave 4.75 stars. This book is a monster. It is an absolute feat of research. It is 530-ish pages alone. I say alone because oftentimes when you have a nonfiction book that is 500 plus pages, usually 100 to 150 of those pages are the references and the notes. Not this book. All 530 pages of this book is the primary content. The author had to put all of his notes and all of his references onto a website because the length of all of those references alone would have doubled the size of the print copy of this book. He had 500 pages worth of notes and references. If that does not say anything about how much intention was put into this book, I don't know what does. This whole book is an account of the rise of modern authoritarianism through the lens of the myth of the Great Replacement Theory, as well as the various permutations this theory has taken around the world. This book is broken up into 10 sections or links that form the greater chain of ideas that form Great Replacement Theory. This book also follows the story of various leaders around the world, their up-and-comings, and how they contribute to this overall global crisis. There is so much to learn from this book. I learned a lot about how authoritarian and right-wing leaders can really subtly sow division based off of false premises and false ideas, and really like how nefarious the idea of Great Replacement is and how it has bled into so much of our lives around the world, and especially here in the United States. It is quite long, and there are a couple of portions that can feel a bit repetitive at times, but I do think this book is worth the time and energy. I think really understanding the strategies that authoritarian regimes utilize against the public, and also how it is morphing the perspectives that people, especially white people, have on the world, is a very important thing to understand. So I think this book is a great learning tool for that. And to round out this video, I have When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I read this with my nonfiction book club in the month of May. This was a beautifully done memoir. I had heard nothing but good things about this book going into it, and I left feeling very satisfied with what I read. In this book, Paul takes you through his early life, growing up, and finding his way to medicine and to surgery. It takes you through his life in undergrad and medical school, falling in love, and eventually to his cancer diagnosis. And a lot of this book talks about what has shaped his view on life, how he processed his diagnosis, and how the diagnosis really impacted how he viewed the world and his own mortality. It's an incredibly moving but also heartbreaking piece of work, and I'm very glad I finally read it. And that, my friends, are the 12 books I read in the month of May. A banger month, if I do say so myself. Hopefully you're inspired to pick something up off of this list, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.